Evan here from Unigroup Engineering, together with you guys again with another Datsun. It is a rally car that's been fuel injected and it runs a built L20B engine. I'm going to run you through the specs now. It is a purpose-built rally car and it runs on New South Wales Rally Vehicle Rego. For purposes of running it on the dyno, we have just normal road tyres. It is actually quite important to run the right tyres on the dyno. I find that running the tall tread rally tyres give inconsistent readings, so we always dyno these cars with hard road tyres. A quick shot of the interior, the roll cage, the seats. We can observe the padding. We've got the control panel for all the switches. It's a fairly simple instrument panel with speedo and tacho, and then we've got fuel level, water temperature and engine oil pressure, and we've also got battery volts. Nice roll cage with side intrusion bars, and as rally cars do, it's got these vents that pressurize the inside of the cabin to stop the dust coming inside on the stages. Under the bonnet we've got a L20B built by Danny Castro. You may remember Danny with his Datsun 1600, the white one, in one of our other videos. He's the man when it comes to these L20s. He seems to make great power. On this combo he was going for a really torquey rally engine, not with a lot of power, but he was going more for torque. So this one's got some extra stroke in it. He tells me that it's a little over 2.3 litres because of the stroke. He's got an EFI system on this one, 45mm throttle bodies into an alloy airbox, and a fairly large area filter that you need for rallies with replaceable outer skins, so between stages he can quickly replace those if he needs to. Now this car, to run the EFI system, also runs a crank trigger setup. This is from a Toyota. It runs the 24 tooth Toyota trigger wheel, which I think comes from the 4A engines. I'm not sure on that myself, but it works quite well on this car. So we've got I believe these are around 650cc injectors from memory. He's got the exhaust system, looks like 4x2x1. I think it's a 2.5-inch system all the way through. A little bit more on the EFI side of things. It runs 4 individual coil packs instead of a single coil and a distributor, which gives better spark. Engine management system is a Haltech Elite 750. The car's been wired up and set up by DC Auto Electrics. They do great work if you're looking at a car like this and this type of electrical setup. This engine's now only 400 or 500 kilometers old. I went to fire this car up at Danny's place to get it going, and then we did a quick road tune just to get some just to be able to get some miles on the car. So the car's been running around on this tune so far, and we're on the dyno today to now get the maximum out of the engine and also get our tune up as best we can. Now most of the time, I must say, all jobs they do come with teething problems, especially on new setups like this one, because the car hasn't had much road time. It's not a mature setup, so there's likely to be things that we're going to find out. Hopefully they're minimal. So again, going through the order of things, we first start with a really basic tune just to be able to get the car started and driving, and then we go straight into the power side of things and we do the full throttle runs. After those are complete, then we go back and finish off the light load and medium load and the drivability side of things, and then finally a road test and further optimization on the road. Now in this Stanza, I've asked him what sort of power he'd be expecting out of this one. He said he's got his fingers crossed for about 165 horsepower. So let's see how this first power run went. Okay, this first run I stopped at 147 horsepower, so we're looking pretty good for the first run. That's actually not bad horsepower on this dyno. Each dyno reads different. Again, to pull 147 horsepower on my dyno with this type of an engine is doing extremely well. Let's take a look at the tune and why we stopped. You can see here we're starting the runs at about 2,500 RPM, and then we've stopped this run at just before 5,600. Along this axis we've got power in horsepower, and on this axis here we've got high speed air fuel ratio, or our fuel mixtures. So on this naturally aspirated engine for our initial runs, we're aiming somewhere around 12.5, 13 to 1 air fuel ratio. The trace down the bottom is our fuel mixture, and you can see here that I was tracking along the target here, but then once we got to about 4,800, the engine started to lean out and it was getting somewhere near 14 to 1 air fuel on this initial map that I had in there. So I stopped there to make some changes. So looking at our power there at 2,500, we're starting with about 55 horsepower, which is quite strong to make that kind of power that low in the rev range. And then we can see that the engine really kicks up in torque around the 4,500 RPM, and we've got this nice gradual rise there. And then she looks like she's headed probably somewhere near 150 horsepower if I didn't back off, maybe a little bit more. Okay, let's go and make some changes and see what we can make out of this engine. Here is where we're at now after we've got the fuel site under control. So we seem to be getting to about 155 horsepower. What I've got on here is 3 different runs with 3 different fuel mixtures. You can see the 3 different fuel mixtures that I'm running here. So if we were to look at the average mixtures, I'm basically running about 12 to 1 average on the pink run, about 12.6, 12.7 on the blue, and maybe a little over 13, 13.1, 13.2 to 1 air fuel on the green. So if we look at power comparisons for each of the 3, they are all very similar. So there's not a lot of difference in fuel mixtures. It's only small gains here. I'm not even sure if the camera's picking up, but the green seems to be just edging out the rest by a very, very small amount. So based on that, we've actually elected to go with our blue, which tends to give away just a tiny bit to the green. So we want to run the vehicle a little bit richer than what makes the actual best power in this case. Because it's a competition car, we're going more for safety, not outright power, and we feel that the blue mixtures give the best compromise. Here's our engine so far. It's idling at about 1,000 RPM. It's got this slight lump in it. I've been told that it is a Valley camshaft. So, very responsive due to the EFI system. So responsive that you can stand on the throttle at any RPM and it responds quite well, runs clean. I guess advantages of modern EFI systems. Now that we've got the fuel side sorted and the mixture's fairly flattened where we'd like to run, next we're going to try how the engine responds to ignition timing. So normally what we do first is we've got our safe ignition timing that seems to run the engine well, which is the way we've been running. Initially we try a little bit less timing, say perhaps 2 or 3 degrees less, to see how much power we lose. Because if the engine doesn't lose any power, then it tells us that we've got sufficient timing and we don't need to increase timing. If the engine actually does lose power and it's a considerable amount, well, we know we're away from our best timing that the engine's going to take. So the next set of runs in the process is this. We've got our baseline ignition timing. We're going to try a little bit less. Then we're going to go back to where we were just to close the loop and see if the engine returns back to the power that we were at. Then we might perhaps try a little bit more ignition timing, and then perhaps a little bit more again, as long as the engine's responding and it is gaining power. Now the engine is fairly high compression from the way it feels, so I've got about 22-25 degrees timing on those runs that I've just shown you. So I've got about 22 degrees near peak torque and about 25 degrees at near peak power RPM, which is around 6,000 RPM. So let's try some ignition settings into the engine and see how much power we pick up or perhaps lose. Results of ignition timing experimentation. I have 3 runs. They are a little bit hard to tell in between. Now the light green run that made the 154.9 horsepower, there you can see in between there is our original timing that we were running. So first I ran the 2 degrees less timing, which is this 153 horsepower figure. Let's look at both power and torque curves. So the grey one did lose out a little bit of torque and a little bit of power, being a little bit weaker in timing. There wasn't a lot of loss in the middle here at about 4,000 RPM. As we kept revving, you can see the torque dropped around the 5,200, 5,400 and 5,600 mark there compared to the others, and there's the corresponding power loss there. It is minimal. We're only looking at maybe 3-4 horsepower through there, so not a big difference. So our timing as we had it as per that light green run was almost close to what the engine wanted. Then we ran the engine on the original timing figure, which made us that 154.9 horsepower. Then the next run we added 2 degrees extra timing to get to that 156. And looking at the what happened, this part of the rev range where I'm ramping in, it's a little bit unreliable. So 2.8 upwards is where the dyno's stable and we are getting good readings. So you can see there with 2 degrees additional timing, dark green versus light green, there's not a lot of gain or any gain down there, and the torque curves doing the same. You can see it there. The only difference begins to appear after 5,000 RPM here. At 5,000 it's still even, but come 5,500 through here, there's maybe 1 or 2 horsepower gain there, and again maybe 1 or 2 horsepower up top, so there's really not much in it. I'm not even sure of putting that additional timing in. There's no real appreciable power gains there. And again, number one thing for us is reliability. This is a rally car. It is going to be out on stages. We need this engine reliable. We need it to keep running strong stage after stage. So I'm going to stay with my original timing curve map for this engine, which if I had to run you guys through, I'm probably around 18, 19, 20 degrees around here at about 25, 2800. By 3000 we have about 22 degrees, which stays in until about 5,000. Then we ramp up to 23 degrees, and then by peak power we've got 25 degrees ignition timing in it, and that seems to be a good compromise. So I think I'm happy with all of that. I'm going to leave the full throttle tuning there. Now I'm going to go and finish off the light throttle. For idle and part throttle, we try to go as lean a mixture as the car will tolerate. Reason for that is, if the car is idling for extended periods, I don't want the plugs being loaded up. So when the car goes to racing mode from sitting around and idling in the staging lanes, it is ready to go. A lot of cars, if we don't have lean and clean mixtures at idle, then after extended idle periods, it may need some good full throttle runs to clear out the plugs. We have an EFI system. We don't have to make such compromises with it. If we take care and time to program it all in, we can have all the mixtures that we need. Unlike a carbureted car, sometimes you are stuck with a compromise in certain areas. Sometimes it can be idle, where the engine just won't idle nice and clean and lean, whereas in this case we can have best of both worlds. One thing I'm really impressed with on this engine, which is very important in a competition car, is the capacity of the cooling system. Now, in between runs, I even had to turn my external fan off to keep enough temperature into the engine. So if I ran my dyno fan on top of the car's fans, it actually cooled down so far that I had to get some heat back into the engine to be able to continue. Right now I'm coming back after about 5 minutes shutdown and my engine temps are down to 65. I've got my fan off outside to get some temperature back into the engine. I like cooler than normal engine temps on competition engines for two reasons. One, if we keep it cooler than usual, and I'm saying in degrees centigrade, say 70 to 80 degrees, say 170 to 180 degrees Fahrenheit, I find that engines take a little bit more ignition timing before they go into spark knock, so they make that little bit of extra power. On this engine, I'm not going for that extra power. But the other consideration is, if I start with the temps low, when something goes wrong, I've got a little bit more time before I go into the range where we're going to start to get too hot and I start to overheat. So what that could mean is, let's say that we've got another 10, 20 seconds or a minute before the end of the stage where we can service the car, and something's gone wrong, say my fan stopped or similar, or my fan belt flew off and my water pump is now not turning. If I've got the engine temps reasonably low or lower than usual, then I've got a little bit more time up my sleeve. That might just get me maybe to that next stage or end of the run, and that can sometimes mean the difference between winning and losing in a competition car. We're nearly at the end of the tune-up, so now I'm going to simulate some road conditions and drive the car like it is going to be used on the racetrack. So I've got the dyno set up, so it is loading the car up as if it's on the road, and let's go for a spin. That felt good. Let's go on the road. Well, that pretty much concludes the Datsun. So we've ended up with about 155 horsepower to the back wheels at relatively low RPM. We're doing that at about 6,000, which is pretty good for an engine like this. Again, remembering that the engine's a stroker with longer stroke, displacing 2.3 litres. The car seems to drive very well. I can't wait to get it out on the road and have a drive. And that's pretty much it. So if you guys liked what we've shown you, like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. That's a beautiful sounding engine, love it. Always love the roar of the L20 engine. It's got this certain induction roar that's hard to sort of replicate with anything else.
I'll bring one very soon. You're gonna love it.
Alrighty.
I'll bring one, a Hottie 2-litre.
Okay, we've got Danny Castro, king of L20Bs. He's going to bring here his the big weapon.
We're building a couple of good engines for the just club cars, and this is a rally engine designed to run on the Outback Trial, and next year Darwin to Sydney rerun.
Sounds good.
Yeah, that means we build for reliability and not for full power.
That's all right. Sounds
Thank you
really
very
good,
much.
mate. No problem. I can't wait to see it on the road.
Thank you.